2, 3, 1.
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls,
Hang
to
on,
the...
I haven't even played the song yet.
Oh, okay.
About the bird.
Everyone likes to dance.
Bird is the word. Bird, and the bird is the word. Bird is the word. Well, a bird is the word. And thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls out there in Gladiators of Sport land here. Stephen J. Peake, your host here today on the Alan Mance Holden's Gladiators of Sport, here at the magnificent premises at Liquid Black Coffee at 165 Ashworth Street in the beautiful Melbourne Bayside suburb of Middle Park. Yes, we've got a magnificent show coming up. And, of course, yes, as you see to my left here, before acceptances is none other than Mr. Philip Mance, the Managing Director of Alan Mance Holden, who's holding up a bag of this magnificent liquid black coffee that I have in my left hand here at this very moment. Liquid black coffee is manufactured in the finest acreages in Queensland, the very state itself in Australia. Yes, pure soils, manufactured there in their superb coffee beans that come through the growth factor.
Do they grow coffee in Queensland?
They do. And it's this magnificent liquid black coffee which is grown in the pure soils of Queensland, Philip.
Can you introduce our
I'm
guest,
doing
please?
that, but you put the bag of liquid coffee in my hands, and I'm now telling the audience about how magnificent liquid black coffee is. Contact Liquid Black Coffee, go to the internet, you'll see their website there, give them a ring, come down and buy your bags of liquid black coffee,
Facebook,
or Josh,
YouTube,
the manager,
he will... Instagram.
Yeah, with what?
Instagram.
Well, I don't use
Dark
other forms of
Cloud.
apparatus.
SoundCloud.
Chief Red Cloud.
Chief Red Cloud.
Yeah, it's all there. Our cloud, iCloud. Our cloud.
His cloud, her cloud.
iCloud. Instagram, emails, internet, all forms of electronic data in
Get on with it.
that you can get your eyes and hands on. You can find liquid black coffee here in Middle Park, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. To my right, I have none other than the former editor of the football division and sports division of the Herald Sun newspaper over a substantial period of time, Mr. Geoffrey Poulter. How are you, Geoffrey?
Thank you.
From the huge studio audience, welcome, Geoffrey.
Thanks, Stephen. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Philip.
Yeah, well done, Geoffrey. And Geoffrey, of course, a Tasmanian, and he's written books on football
won't
in
hold that against
Tasmania
you.
as well as here in Victoria, and an
Can you just
expert.
let Geoffrey talk a bit longer so I can actually get his sound up?
You're trying to synchronise the
Go,
sound.
talk, Geoffrey, because otherwise he'll just take
Well,
over.
I've introduced him, but we've got Mr. Troy Zantuck here as well from 11.6 and SEN, who's our question man here tonight behind the camera with young Dan there, who's sorting out the camera work.
Is it Dan or Ben?
Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you very much, Phil, and great to see you, Pulse.
Pleasure to be
And
here.
I've
Troy.
got Dan
Good to see
stroke Ben with me.
you. Yeah.
He's in charge of audio, he's in charge of visuals, so great to have Ben on board and Dan as well.
Yeah.
And Michael Sparr tells our studio audience, great to have Michael in, and Peaky, back to you.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Troy. Just as I mentioned here, of course, I've mentioned Mr. Philip Mance here, Alan Mance Motors, Footscray, Melton, Bacchus, Mars, quality new and used cars across the spectrum there. HSV, Holden, Suzuki, Mitsubishi, Nissan and Citroen, mon ami, Geoffrey. The greatest new and used car dealer in the Southern Hemisphere. Driving satisfaction is Alan Mance. Yellow Door, breakfast and brunch eatery in Albert Park, footpath dining, inner house and courtyard family and dog-friendly dining, Philip. Take your pick.
Can't we just
Chalkboard
point
for
at the
children.
things on your chest?
Yeah, again, it's all written on a shirt. We've mentioned liquid black coffee, of course, right here, and Ricardo Trattoria, don't
You know,
forget.
Geoffrey, last week, if you didn't watch the show,
Right.
he had spilt, and what was it? On
It was
his,
sukiyaki sauce.
Sukiyaki sauce. Now,
Yeah, on the front of my... I had another shirt or a long sleeve shirt.
Geoffrey, this week, he spilt something else.
I haven't spilled anything.
It looks like-
Bosom region, but we're not too game to ask what it might be.
Looks like I haven't.
You're not lactating, are you?
Looks like one of those Mark Webber shirts, doesn't it?
Mark Webber, yeah. Well, it's adorned and embossed with the appropriate advertising, is what I do. In fact, it probably hasn't got enough on it, but we can rectify that in the next batch.
Right.
Ricardo's Trattoria down there in Albert Park, not Middle Park, there, Albert Park. I'm talking about home-cooked Italian meals, ladies and gentlemen, for the finest aficionados of the fine art of traditional Italian cooking. Open all weekend lunch and a special Sunday lunch, $29. Get down there this Sunday, special $29 Sunday lunch at Ricardo's Trattoria, 66 Dundas Place, Albert Park.
What do you
Thank
get for
very much.
$29? What do you get for $29?
$29 you get a main course, a magnificent main course with bread, Italian cooked oven-baked bread.
Yeah.
And you get some beautiful balsamic oil to dip it in before you have your main course. You get a glass of wine.
We
with
have
that.
to actually go through all your sponsors that
You get a glass
that
of wine.
feed you. We're going to
You get a glass of wine.
We might as well
and
shut.
you can
well,
have a cappuccino as well.
it'll be
Get
a
my
30
coffee.
And thanks
It'll
for
be a
joining us on the
60-minute
Gladiators of Sport.
infotainment, won't it?
That ends our 5th episode, and thanks to you, Pulse, for your input.
Pulse.
And
Just
Phil,
trying to tell Philip to be
remember-
careful. He hasn't put his elbow in my coffee because I don't have enough room here. You see.
It's like that Adelaide race caller. You remember when they came out of the Alumba boxes and then went past, the cellar corner into the straight, and then they on the Penfolds winning post, and the bloke would get a box of wine on his front door every Saturday morning.
Really?
Yeah, well, a box of what?
Well, whatever he was plugging.
Oh, I see. Interesting sponsorship deal.
Remember that? Yeah.
Quite an extrapolator.
Right up your alley.
Yeah, well, he's an extrapolator, so I need to think about that.
is this the Gladiators of Sport or Urban Spoon?
Whatever it is.
No, it's TripAdvisor.
Now, just before we get on to Geoffrey, he's got some quirky issues to talk about, and then we've got topics coming up. We did a bit of house cleaning from last week. Because last week, you might remember, ladies and gentlemen, that the two gentlemen that are here today, one Mr. Mance and one Mr. Zantuck, highly critical of my criticism of James Magnuson and indicated that when he got to the Olympic trials, he may have had a bung shoulder. Well, that wasn't the case, gentlemen. I'm going to have to chastise you here.
Well, what
Mr.
was it?
Magnuson's shoulder was in perfect condition, as indicated in two articles that I found in Evidence, ladies and gentlemen, over the week. He was in 100% condition for those trials. Unfortunately, failed at the trials as far as getting individual pursuit. Geoffrey is now a relay team member. It's just a bit sad. Magnuson's career has gone from chocolates to boiled lollies to a certain degree on an individual basis, but he can still help Australia win a gold medal in a relay.
Yes. Sometimes it's difficult to maintain form over 4 years, Stephen.
Yeah.
You have your peak period, and then that's it.
That
If you
can
don't
happen.
if you don't take
an
advantage,
article-
Yourself,
yeah.
you've got to be topped up the whole time,
There was
don't
an
you?
article in the paper today about the American swimmer. What's his name?
Oh, Michael Phelps, who's in
Phelps,
trouble.
who's
Yeah.
fallen off the perch as well. Is it something about swimming?
I think there's a lot of pressure on swimmers.
I think there's a very short window, Phil.
Like
Very,
that-
very
well-
short. Mark Spitz was another one, Pulse,
Yeah.
who won 7 gold medals at the 1972 Munich Olympics and then just couldn't sustain that. It's an exceptional level that they get to. You get Kieran Perkins, you've got guys like Ian Thorpe,
Yeah.
Phelps, and they reach a ceiling. They dominate the sport, but I don't think it's a sport.
Haven't they got anything on the other side of the hill? Is that the problem?
That's the problem.
Well, I
That's a
don't
big
think
problem.
it lends itself to longevity, Phil,
No.
in answer to your question.
And it takes a certain type of person to get up at 5 a.m. and
Oh.
swim for 3 hours and then do the same thing at night time.
So you gotta remember-
Absolutely.
Well, I think we touched on this last week. These kids, they start their training when they're about 8 or 9 years of age. The parents drive them to the pool, and they're coached at a young age, 7, 8, 9, 10 years of age, all the way through their school. And they get to school, probably some of them falling asleep on the desk, you'd imagine. And they're trying to do their schoolwork, and then they go back to swimming in the afternoon. They go back to the pool at 5 o'clock for another big session before dinner, and then they go to bed. So if their schooling's if they can't squeeze all the schooling in with the swimming, when they turn 18, 19, they're champion swimmers, but could be bereft in the area of academic or trade skills or whatever it might be, Geoffrey.
Yeah,
And,
that's true.
panel.
Unless they get a job in the media, like...
well, you get something like that. How you keep it under control is a big problem. But what we've seen, Phelps, we've seen Hackett. We didn't mention Hackett last week because we were too busy fighting over Magnuson, but Hackett he had another torrid week last
Well,
week.
that was the bloke when I said leave him alone. 'Cause
Yeah.
I thought that's who you were going to bring up.
Yeah, you did. You made an assumption at that point that I was actually going to raise him.
I did.
Phil,
I was going to raise him. and
I'll
you-
say it.
you-
I'll say it again.
You jumped on
leave
me.
him alone.
Philip,
Yeah.
do you think he's blown his chance of being a mentor at Rio?
Quite, mate.
To what? A mentor
He's
where?
going to mentor the team. He was
At the
before
games?
the
Was he gonna be a
plane.
mentor? He was going to be a mentor.
Before
You're
the
right.
plane, yeah.
Well, I haven't heard that
That
one.
might be in trouble. And the other position was as a media guy
It's
there.
Channel 7 commentator.
Yeah, so I don't know what's happening with that. They haven't said yet whether or not he's still going to... I think Channel 7 will probably do the right thing by the boy and see if he can come up, so to speak, for the games and get himself back
Well,
into
he was
shape.
just tired and emotional, Troy, wasn't
I
he?
think...
Yeah, he was
I think he was drifting. I think it might be...
Drifting.
I reckon you might get 5s or 6s about that.
nipple cripple.
Well, there was an alleged incident, which happened on the on the plane.
Oh, look,
I think a gentleman,
everyone's read it.
Yeah.
Everyone's seen
a
it.
gentleman put his airplane seat back to try and get some sleep.
But he was in business.
And
How,
he,
how, just,
That
That was the
just
one
on
thing
panel,
about that.
boys.
That was the one thing about the whole thing that
Yeah.
I sided with him. I hate people putting
I was
their
going
seat
to
back.
put that question
There's
to
no
the
room
panel.
on the
No,
plane.
but
Yeah.
in economy
And-
there's no room.
and there's
I
no
believe he
room.
was in business. Like in business, there's plenty of room. So I
Well,
can't see what the problem was.
And
Is he-
apparently he leaned over to the guy and he just said, "Could you push it forward, mate?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously he was tired and emotional, and the guy's just
I think the key is get the seat right up the front, the first one. Then no one can put their
1A
seat back.
Polts.
That's it.
1A.
And no one
Yeah,
can put
but
the
I think
seat back.
if you don't get an automatic response or instant response from a gentleman who's soaking up more area than he should be, I don't believe
It's
that.
not just hypothetically somebody sitting in a
Yes.
airline seat
But
next to you.
Yeah, but
How would you react if somebody pushed it back on you?
Yeah, who was in front of me, you mean?
No, but what
The
about
size
to the
that you
front,
are,
to
if
the
somebody
side.
pushed it back,
Yeah,
You'd
sitting
be
in front,
absolute-
pushing back onto
Yeah.
me.
well, you'd be concertinaed, wouldn't you?
I'd be making. I wouldn't
Well,
be
you couldn't
making a
get out.
complaint, but I'm just saying that your next step, if you don't get a response from the man who's soaking up too much space, Philip, you wouldn't go straight to what you would call an assault upon the chest region of that person.
Would you?
It's
I
one
don't
of the
think-
great.
allegedly you wouldn't reach over and get a claw out.
Well, anybody
get a
that
claw.
reclined their seat onto the back of you would be suffering whiplash as we speak.
Bounce back.
I know you need to go the claw, first up.
But you
I
can
think.
stick your fingers in his nose and just yank him back up. Hey, get back up here.
No, but I
But
think
the other problem, Troy, is sitting next to Mr. Peake. Don't
Yeah.
worry about reclining back on him.
Yeah, he's a
How
ner-
would you be,
look,
Jeffrey, if you had
Yeah.
to have to sit next to the
Well, that's right.
sweating
There's been
globule?
he's a nervous traveller.
Oh,
You've self-described,
well, you
Stephen,
need to have a
nervous
towel
traveller.
down. You need your dressing gown to soak up all the sweat.
there's been some great
Yeah.
I do
movies.
sweat
mate.
up on a plane, but I've bled once on a plane as well, which is
There's
I've had to
been
get a
some
towel
great
out,
movies
tea
made
towel.
about Philip, hasn't there, and Troy, about people, lying on the passenger next to them, getting pinned down during
yeah.
the flight.
John Candy style.
Yeah, John
Planes,
Candy,
trains, and
that's it.
automobiles.
Yeah, that's
And
it.
heaven help if the seat was, someone hit the wrong button and it springs back up, you could get catapulted forward
Yeah,
into an air hostess or an attendant.
Oh, well, that'd be terrible.
but you.
Arrested on the
Yeah,
spot.
the answer is because you're only paying $86 or something. you're entitled to get crowded.
If you had a joker like that pushing back on you in the economy area, you'd be better off travelling in cartage with the livestock. Would you not?
You'd be strapped to a pallet.
Certainly something to think about. I would.
Now,
I
I've
would
got
think
it.
to think. Yep.
Talking about last week,
Yep.
someone came up and I asked you two what the scores were from last week because someone said that 100 points was in the back of my head on who was going to win and who was going
Yeah,
to
I tipped Geelong to win by 48 points, which is exactly what they did in the game they won.
Who
I
was
was
the
spot on.
100-point game?
I got Adelaide Hawthorn wrong. I tipped Adelaide.
I can't. Can you remember, Troy?
I also
look,
tipped another decision. I tipped Melbourne to beat Richmond by 5
The
goals.
tip that I can remember, Phil, is actually tipped GWS
Yeah.
to defeat St Kilda by 6 to 8 goals.
Yeah.
And I think the margin was 43 points.
Yeah. So 7 goals. So he was spot on with that tip. Yeah, we'll give him that.
I think you may have called him imbecile. I think.
Yeah, I had a crack at him over another game. In fact, I've forgotten the game because he got it completely wrong by about 10 goals. And I can't remember the game at this point in time. And I told you that game during the week. Now, I've lost focus
Or was
on
it
what
Essendon
game
Collingwood
that
that was the... I actually know
He
I was
got-
happy that it
He
Collingwood...
tipped Richmond. He tipped Richmond to win by 5 goals.
Stephen actually tipped Essendon to win comfortably over Collingwood.
By
And,
5 goals.
and he was only, 100 points out. Close.
Yeah, but he tipped Richmond by 5 goals and Melbourne won by 5.5 goals. He
Yeah,
was 10.5 goals
I think
out.
he won because you were out by 100. He was only out by 5.
65 points. Okay, well, it's half a dozen of one and half a dozen of the
Yeah,
other.
you just keep looking at your notes.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm
So-
glad
That hang
today's
dog
day.
look, I like it.
Jeffrey,
Keep it up.
Jeffrey?
were you happy that Collingwood won? Because if they hadn't have won, what do you think?
Why would he be happy
Well, I
about
don't think it meant anything at all, really. I mean, there would have been a hell of a lot more pressure on him if he'd lost, obviously. But what did they beat Essendon minus their 12 best players? I mean, and they left Crowley out, and I cannot believe they left him. He's the best tagger I reckon he's the best tagger I've ever seen. You know, they talked about why don't they tag Mitchell. He kept Mitchell to 9 in the 2013 grand final.
Correct.
And he gets 30 in most games, doesn't he?
That's actually 3 years ago, Poulter. It's 2016 now.
Yeah, but
Yeah, 2013. No,
he's
but
going by precedent.
I'm
He's
just
allowed to
saying
do
that's the highlight of his career. But
Absolutely.
he actually played quite well in the Sunday game in the reserves.
He's had a year out of the game. His effective disposals.
He had 40
on
on Sunday.
He kicks the ball sideways.
Kicked 4
There's
goals
no
in the
penetration.
AFL. And had 30
No, I
possessions.
thought we were talking about the AFL.
Well, yeah, but in
Sorry.
when the game that you just
I
had this
think
weekend,
if
was
you go to
on
the
ground.
trouble, you may be right. He might have had a poor game the week before. I'm not saying that wrong. I'm just saying that if you go to the trouble of bringing this bloke across from West Australia and bring him out of retirement,
I agree with that,
you
but there are
play,
reasons.
don't
I'm
you?
just putting
You don't
forward
play him in the seconds
reasons
at
as to
Wendy
why.
Hill, you know.
Right, so there's that
Yeah,
one.
but I'll tell you this: if you Errol-dite yourself to statistics solely, then and you expect that, okay, if this guy gets 30 every week, this guy gets 25, that guy's 20 going to win the game. That doesn't happen that way, in my view, because a lot of other things happen in a game of football. Crowley is not a massive possession gatherer when he's following around the other side's best player normally each week. A Gary Ablett, a Selwood, a Johnson, or someone like that. He's normally got the best player when he was at Freo. He's following around the best on-baller in the team. His job is to stop talent from getting possessions, not to get possessions himself. Get him, that's a bonus. But if he stops talent, that's what he does. Now, Troy, wouldn't you say that that's the job Ross Lyon gave him?
I'm sure John Morsfield would have a handle on where Crowley's at the moment.
Right now, yeah, I'm talking about his history, and his job at Freo was to stop
He's been
talent.
a fantastic tagger, Peaky, over the journey. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's unquestionable.
And he was quite a good player before he was a tagger.
Yeah, before he became
Like
a tagger.
you know, fellas like Ling and Kirk, and they seem to be born to be taggers. Whereas this guy was he's a half forward. He wasn't anything like a tagger.
And
If
he
you ever look
became
at the first few, he wasn't. You
He
wouldn't
was
have
moulded
believed.
into a tagger.
Well,
I agree with
right.
I agree with the
Absolutely.
comment about the best tag you've seen. I'd probably put Stephen Baker equal with him. Baker and Crowley I see as equals. Both of them could stop talent and not just stop them but also operate on
And
them.
Ling and Kirk got in all Australian teams as taggers.
Yeah, Ling and Kirk played within
Now,
the rules.
All right, so we're not too worried. Now, what about Fremantle? Obviously, last year they were Norton 4. Now they're
Norton
4 and Norton, and now they're Norton 4.
Well, they can't
were
sack
they
the
4
coach because
last year?
he's got a contract till the end of 2020.
Who's that? Oh,
I say they can't sack the
he's a
coach.
love
child.
No.
So,
Yeah, he's right as rain. He was buoyant at the press conference last week. And
Well, why wouldn't you be after such a start?
no, he's looking at the situation. He knows in his mind, that current list as it is, the 42, they're cooked, right?
But no one picked
They're
that.
cooked.
No one picked that before the year.
No.
So
No,
everyone,
we didn't see it
picked-
coming.
everyone still picked him
Brad
in the top
Johnson.
4.
I think some people expected him to go down 2 or 3 or 4
notches,
slots, but
yeah.
not
Brett-
10.
like that.
Brett
No,
Johnson, before the season started, Phil,
Yeah.
just on that, was the only tipster, the only ex-footballer who tipped them to finish outside the 8.
Really?
And he gave a laundry list of reasons, and well, it's coming to fruition.
Because I was
So,
just listening on the radio on the way in, and several people around the table on SEN were saying that they had to put him in the 8, or even in the top 4.
Yeah,
because
correct.
there
Yeah,
is
They got
no
11,
way.
11 home games, and
They just said, we just cannot believe how far they've capitulated in the first 4
Well,
rounds.
It's incredible.
I
Yeah, it is.
don't know what Brad Johnson's reasons were, but what's happened since is that they tried to change the game plan around. He tried to make him more attacking.
They
He-
couldn't
he
play
was
that
pushing-
badly.
Yeah, but he's-
Like you could just say do whatever you want.
they recruited Guerra and Hale on their coaching committee
yeah, they did to Hawthorn.
perhaps to introduce the Hawthorn element.
Game plan into it, and he's
And
trying to push
I
himself
doubt
back.
whether
So-
Lyon agreed with it. I reckon he's probably disagreed with it, but he's decided to go along with it. You know?
You're bringing in a little bit of a conspiracy there. The board might have had a word to him and said, look, we've got these Hawthorn blokes, we want to try and play a bit more like Hawthorn.
Yeah. Well,
And they
more
tried to
attacking
change.
anyway. Yeah.
David King wrote a big article on it a few weeks ago, and he just says, that ain't working. He's got to go back to lockdown.
And the game's changed, you see. They've actually it's good, I'm happy.
Overcompensated.
But I reckon they have.
Yeah.
Don't tell them that, whatever you do.
Now, the game's gone past.
It's got
type
Oh, I don't
style.
believe it has
Oh,
at all.
100%.
I
90,
don't believe
90,
that.
the
I
90,
don't believe that.
Why?
the exclusion
Not at all.
zone, the 90
you don't see
interchanges, and the out of bounds rule. Those 3 rules you can see how much scoring. It's 20% more scoring, and we were struggling with 71, 74, 75 average points. It's now into the 90s.
And to most
you know?
supporters that you talk
It's,
to
the
these
game
days,
is suddenly as good as it was 20 years
Oh,
ago.
100%.
the instalment of
Suddenly,
those rules
yeah.
has really opened it up,
Yes.
and aesthetically, as a football supporter, it's so much better.
But is that all got
to
to
go
do
and
with
watch
the
those
interchange
games?
referee, do you think?
hang on a
three
minute.
things.
You can't
the
lump all
exclusion-
supporters into the same bracket, right?
The
You can't.
there's three. Philip asked whether it was only the one change.
Is it
It's
I
three
said-
changes.
Yeah, was it just the interchange that's made the difference? Because there's a big difference.
No, it's
Yeah, that is a
it's
big
the out of bounds rule, but more particularly the exclusion zone. It's
The
gone
10
from-
metre exclusion
you
zone.
can
That thing, yeah,
take
yeah.
off now. Everyone's taking off, and
they're
they're not
running around like
confined.
chooks. Look,
up and down the ground.
With no defence. Defence. It's as if the AFL's trying to throw defence out the window or whatever, and they've got to think, we've got to get crowds in, so we've got to make it attack. Well, it's not basketball, it's football, right? Which is defence and attack. But don't put me in that same category as people who just want to see shootouts every week, because that's not how I see football as a war of attrition.
You're in a category all your own, my friend.
Well, I'm happy
that's
to be.
true.
No, I'm in it with
again,
Ross Lyon.
whatever
I'm in it with Ross
you-
Lyon. I'm in
you-
it with Alan Jeans. I'm in it with Matthews partially and with Malthouse partially.
Well, whatever
and
you think,
Paul Roos
it's
fully.
more
Paul
attractive.
Roos says
anyway.
if you don't have a proper defence, you will never ever win a flag. That's what Paul Roos says. Defence is everything when he became coach of Melbourne. And we will toughen up our defence and then we'll work on everything else from there. Now, that's what Paul Roos says. So, and you all admire Paul Roos. You speak to Paul Roos, you talk to Paul Roos, you
Rules
talk to
or
Ross,
Roos?
Ross Lyon, Paul Roos, and these guys, and maybe even Rodney.
Well, it's a different game now.
Well,
It's a
I know
different
there's
game. He
been
may
some-
not think that anymore.
There's been some tweaking, Geoffrey. There's been
Because
some
it's right.
tweaking.
Roos may not think that way anymore.
What about the
If-
new
if I
rule
was-
that they're going to think about doing is like not the throw in of out of bounds, like I think the
Last-
Women's League's going to try it.
Last to touch it or something.
Yeah, last to touch it.
I see, this is to
That's
me,
a
it's
bit
the out of
dodgy.
bounds on the fullest when the ball
It
gets.
could be contrived, you know. You get yourself a free kick, handball into a bloke's leg or something.
Yeah.
When the umpire sensibly, using good old-fashioned common sense, says you've deliberately kicked it out of bounds, then it's out of bounds on the full. Doesn't have to make the decision. It's out anyway, right? That to me is where it starts and finishes. It's got to come off a boot. to be doing that.
The key is to encourage people not to kick the ball along the boundary line.
Well,
That's why
for
they've
crying
brought the
out
rule
loud,
in. And
well-
it's too harsh, but it doesn't matter.
Mild
It's
has
better
it.
being too harsh because it has that effect.
I mean, Mildhouse would have won a flag in 2010 if he worked the boundary line like a fine instrument.
But
Like a
but
piccolo
there was
player.
also a lot more stoppages and packs in those games.
Yeah, we see, I
Well,
find
the game's
football-
far more attractive now
well, it's
than it was
attractive to you.
when
You see-
Malthouse was coaching.
Geoffrey, if you and I, for instance, you and I go walking into the National Art Gallery, right?
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. Pulse.
I
I,
go
hope
straight
that
for
never
the
happens
Mona
to
Lisa.
you, mate, because
Walk in
you'll be
the-
handcuffed.
We walk in the art gallery, you
Walk
look up at the wall.
out of
Isn't
that gallery.
Isn't that a beautiful Renoir painting up there? And I said,
Oh.
Geoffrey, I don't like that at all. I said,
Have a
I
listen to
like- I
Andy
like
Warhol
Picasso.
over here.
I like Picasso.
No,
over
he's
here, right?
Wawa. He looks a
Yeah,
bit
you
like
see,
Wawa.
it's all in the eye of the beholder. But I loved what Lyon did with St Kilda between 2008 to 2011, especially in 9 and 10. I loved that crushing effect, that absolutely suffocation until a team was so squeezed of energy and desire to get the ball.
that everyone
and then
stopped watching it.
And then the second half, St Kilda go and kick 12, 14 goals.
What was happening to the game, Stephen, is that people like fellas that I know, like Alex Jeselenko, were saying that they weren't going to the football anymore or going home during the game.
I
It's
couldn't watch it.
because they
It's just
couldn't cope with all this business of kicking it backwards and sideways
kicking
and,
I don't like, yeah.
and packs and stacks and
Well,
all
they
this.
were- they were
And the
becoming-
game was ugly. Now,
Absolutely,
you may
Pops.
well like the physical stuff, but
yeah, I do.
they've made this move because they want the game to become more attractive.
It was becoming very rugby-like, a rugby hybrid, and also basketball. You had them kicking backwards, zigzagging, and also those scrums, which infuriated me.
Yeah.
Just to lock it down
The
and chuck
mauls,
it up
yeah.
and throw it up.
But that's where strong, tough men showed their wares. You know, the Bakers of this world were at their element inside those scrums.
Anyway, we've
So
been
you're even
connected-
laughing at your own proposition.
That's all right. I know that people find some of what I say occasionally offensive.
Well,
Or
most
whatever.
of the time, yeah, actually.
Whatever as far as that's concerned. But we've
Yeah,
already
I think
won.
I don't find
Now,
it
if I was-
offensive. I just find it ridiculous.
Well, it's not ridiculous because, it got Ross Lyon to 3 grand finals, 2 grand finals, a grand final replay, and it won Malthouse a flag.
Didn't win one, did he?
I don't know.
Sure.
And it won Sydney. What about the 2 grand finals in 05 and 06 Sydney West Coast?
Well,
they
they were
were
the-
played in a telephone box.
They were the worst spectacles I've ever seen.
Here, Pulse.
And, people, the old-fashioned people,
1989, Hawthorn Geelong.
yeah.
One of the greatest grand finals
was-
of all
was-
Well, if
was
you
a
have a
grand
look at the
final.
winners for they're rebooting the winners. You have a
With
look
Drew
at
Morfitt,
footy
yes.
in the 80s. It was quite attractive, wasn't
yeah,
it?
exactly.
They got the ball and they
At
kicked
times.
it as far as they could. You know?
And we're getting back to that now.
Which is, don't forget the Lion game plan also was to get the ball when you could kick it to a contest, make sure you had your men, there was more than just the two going for the mark around the contest. So it was kicked at 60 minutes a contest. Recently, when St Kilda played the Bulldogs at Etihad, I didn't like the dinky kicking across the ground, 15 metres, and it's all right to attack handball, but when you've got guys running through the middle and 5 or 6 get through, 7 or 8 are going to get smashed by the opposition, are going to catch up with them, and that was happening as well. So some of your attacking football can turn out to be a bit of a
Phil's
flop when
just
you're
gone
trying
for
to kick
coffee,
goals.
ladies and gentlemen.
So
We'll be back in probably 5 minutes.
No, we're not going anywhere.
No, Phil's just got off his seat, Stephen, so...
That's okay.
And when Phil gets back and
there's
he's back.
no need to stop the show, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry about that interference, but Philippus, you're quite entitled. If you need to go to the powder room or to get a coffee, that's fine. Don't worry about a thing, right? And the gentleman's.
It's just good manners, Peaky, for the viewers to know that Phil just had to order a coffee.
They would have seen that, Troy. I reckon they could have seen what was going on without having to interview
Sorry that you lost your train of thought.
interview the flow. So, do you think Ross Lyon, Geoffrey, can rebuild from where he's at the moment? You said, like the Merv Williams quote, the boy's got the wheelbarrow in front of him up the hill, he's got the job ahead of him, etc., etc.
And how long?
Oh, well, he's got. How many coaches have been lucky enough to be given 5 years?
5-year deal, yeah.
4.5 years, or
You've
4
got
and
to be
3
one of the
quarters.
best to get those deals.
So what they do is they go down and you know, sometimes everybody's got to go down a bit. Clubs like my club, North, can't afford to go down, unfortunately. We've been for 30 years we've been playing. We need to win at least 50% of the matches, otherwise.
Just a quick one, Pulse. And
have done, incidentally. I think since Barassi arrived at North, we've won the second most number of games behind Hawthorn. Do you believe that?
What an incredible
43
stat
years.
that is. Just on that, because to me, you're North Melbourne's historian. Nobody else knows more about North Melbourne. When was the last time that North finished on the bottom?
Well, they finished on the bottom in 72.
In 72?
Yeah, they won one game in 72.
Was that under Brian Dixon?
Yes.
Yeah,
Barassi took over the next
in
year.
73. Because they just missed the finals in 73. They lost an important game.
So that's incredible that they've had this run, North Melbourne, 1972, and they have not finished on the bottom.
No, and as I said, and won more finals than any other team other than Hawthorn in that period.
In that period?
Amazing,
in 43 years. Well,
in the 70s?
See, well, they had an outstanding team in the 70s, outstanding team in the 90s. 80s were okay, but they didn't go right down in the 80s.
And the glory teams of the 90s.
And the noughties have been okay as well. They haven't gone down to the bottom.
No.
And they can't afford to.
And they're flying this
So
year.
everybody has a... You either make that choice, like Richmond didn't they? But they can afford to go to the bottom, Richmond, because they've got
Kilda can seem to afford to do it a lot, can't they?
St Kilda?
I'm not sure. Well, they've got closet supporters. The Bulldogs and North can't afford to do it. And there's no guarantees anyway. You can go down, and Richmond are finding that, aren't they?
Prevail.
Yeah.
There's no guarantees that you're going to... You get that one chance like Port Adelaide had a couple of years ago, and Richmond haven't even got to that level. So there's no... Melbourne, everyone's excited about Melbourne, but they look like they're on the way, but you don't know. You might only get... There's only one winner every year. There's 17 losers, remember?
Yeah, it's correct.
So it's very difficult even to get to a preliminary final.
Yeah, but the fans just all they want is to see some improvement.
Yes.
And I think most of them are placated by that.
Some hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We understand
Positive.
there's only one premier.
Yeah.
But they need to see...
But I'm just saying sometimes the surge comes up. You know, like Collingwood in reverse at the moment. You go 14th, 12th, 8th, 10th, 6th, but you can't get any further than 6th, and you go back and start
and you
all
hit the
over again.
roadblock. But what about the Bulldogs? It's been an extraordinary performance.
Yeah.
What Luke
Well,
Beveridge has done in his
suddenly, yeah.
his 2-year tenure at the Bulldogs.
Amazing.
Tonight's going to be a good game because you've got
It's going to be an absolute corker.
North Melbourne, who's the old team, if you like, and Footscray, who are the young team. So
That'll be a good challenge, no doubt
And
about that. But just getting back onto Barassi, who was mentioned before, as a legend of a coach and a fantastic fellow and all the rest of it. When you look at the stats, Geoffrey, his win-loss ratio in finals matches is 53% overall for his Carlton and North Melbourne. It's about 53% win-loss every final.
That is absolute baloney.
It's 53%, Troy.
With North Melbourne and Carlton.
With North Melbourne and Carlton.
I think you're actually forgetting that he coached Sydney
Sydney,
when they
throw that
couldn't
in,
register a win. And
Throw that in.
And 5 years at Melbourne,
Oh, I thought
where
you-
they were absolutely...
I thought you meant in
Go and get the book.
No, 50,
He's got a win
no,
loss
I misunderstood.
53%.
53% overall.
Win loss.
Overall,
I thought
said
you meant
overall.
in finals.
I said overall.
In finals, he's
Carlton and North Melbourne.
I said Carlton and North Melbourne. I forgot about him coaching Sydney. But he didn't. Did they make the finals under Brassie? Only coached 2
he
years
coached
there.
Melbourne for 5 years.
And Melbourne, yeah.
They didn't
Is
make
there an echo in here? Did I just not say
Troy,
that?
for the listeners'
Telling you.
benefit and for everyone's benefit, Ron Brassie coached so many matches in finals. In those finals matches, his win-loss is 53%
I don't
win,
believe
47% loss.
No, that can't be right.
I went through these statistics
Not in
some time
finals.
ago with a group of friends of mine. His finals ratio of wins-losses.
Okay,
Now, who's
homework
got
for
the
next
book?
week.
Go and check it up. That's for next week's homework. What is Ron Barassi's percentage? In fact, get the coaches going down the list of their win-loss ratio on finals, and you'll see what comes up. And it's quite extraordinary. It is quite
If his
extraordinary.
record was that if ordinary in finals, he wouldn't have reached that many grand
He
finals
won't-
and preliminary
no,
finals.
don't
You've
have
got
to.
to win more
Yeah.
than 53% to get there.
Final four system, you can lose the second semi, win the preliminary, win the grand final, lose the second semi, win the prelim, lose the grand final, and that's 1 out of 3. That's 33% for that year, and so forth and so forth. It's 53% win-loss. Check it out, ladies and gentlemen at home.
So
and
what would
send
Malthouse
SMSs and
be?
emails.
What would Malthouse?
Malthouse, off the top of my head, I don't know, but he's somewhere.
well,
he's around
maybe
the same
50
mark.
well, maybe
I
50
think he's down around the same mark.
Maybe 53% is a good score then.
There's nothing wrong with 53%. It's a success rate.
No, because Barassi's coached as well in finals as anyone.
Oh, no doubt.
So
No doubt.
maybe 53%.
All right,
Maybe
well,
on your
we'll keep
basis,
that for,
if you win one,
and
lose
you've got to
one.
remember, a lot of that time he was up against Alan Jeans and Tom Havey, who have all got records very similar. I think Jeans is around 61% because the Hawthorn factor boosted him up. At St Kilda, he was around the 50%, 51%. Going to Hawthorn boosted him to 61, 62%. In finals, win-loss ratio.
I find
ladies
that
and gentlemen.
I'm staggered by those.
You'd be
things.
staggered by it. That's why I raised it,
I'm
because I thought
staggered
you would
that
be
Alan
staggered.
James has got an 8% better record in finals than
Yep,
Barassi.
have a look at it. And next week I will present, I'll do the homework, ladies and gentlemen, and present the ladder of percentage coach wins.
And if it's
win-loss
wrong, he'll
ratio.
doctor it up to make sure it's right.
No, one thing you cannot do is doctor statistics.
Okay.
Philip, statistics are statistics, as you know, at all times. All times. Yep.
Yeah.
Now,
Righto.
next position. And now, given we're talking North Melbourne, and not North Melbourne, Geelong, I'm thinking of the Scott brothers. We saw an incident last week where Chris Scott had to chastise a Port Adelaide player on the field at quarter. We didn't have to, but he did at quarter time. Jeffrey, have you got an issue, a problem with coaches and opposition players, or coaches and opposition coaches talking on the ground at quarter time, coming off the field half time, 3/4 time?
I don't think it's wise, Stephen. I can recall 3 incidents called Barassi. I mean, when Keith Gregg was put into the fence at North in '74, I recall Barassi having a
did
go
that
at
to him?
Manasseh at quarter time. I can remember Walls having a go at half time in the '83 preliminary when Merritt on Harris or somebody like that, and Matthews to Gavin Brown at half time in the 1990 grand final. Remember, Matthews said to Terry Danaher.
Terry Danaher,
after
they were involved in that incident.
He said he'll be back. Gavin Brown will be back. No, look,
Kevin Sheedy with Mitchell White.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's right. With the
The
throat cut.
pirate throat slip.
I forgot about that. But no,
And,
it's probably unwise. Because
Stephen
Malthouse
Mills
said,
and Michael Malthouse, 2010.
said, that
Etihad
was after the
Stadium.
game, wasn't it?
And Stephen Baker.
That was after the game.
That was at quarter time. Quarter time after
Right.
the incident where Stephen Baker was fighting with about 8 Collingwood players.
Yeah,
just before.
yeah. Well, I think it's unwise because it can spark something. You know, the people that run the place wouldn't want coaches
That
having a
sparked
crack.
something. Yeah.
They wouldn't want coaches involved. Don't you think, Troy?
Oh,
Yeah.
it's an ugly look for the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's good that the Brad Scott can stick up for our blokes occasionally, you know, and say something. He said something a couple of
is an
years
ugly
ago.
look for
Did he? I'm to remember. Brad Scott said something to somebody a couple of years ago.
The Scots get involved. They enjoy being involved in the game.
And I think it's, you know, you feel good that your club's getting support, but it's in the overall scheme of things, it's unwise because it could spark something out of control, couldn't it?
I think what was being reported is Chris Scott said, look, Pell, cool it down a bit to Hamish Hartlett. I think you should cool it down, and Hartlett responded to him and said, look after your own backyard. Now, you know, I would have thought that Chris Scott would have then responded to him, well, I am, by telling you to lay off, or else I'll, you know, if I'd have been Chris Scott, I would have said,
clock
mate, what?
I'll clock you.
Clock me where? I'll clock you, okay. I thought you were referring to the time for a minute.
You can't have
I
that.
would have said, look, pal, I would have done it this way. I said,
No,
well,
that's-
hear what
that's
you say.
true.
I hear what you say, but you run into another one of our blokes like that we don't like, and we'll deal with you. But they don't seem to engage in that type of comment much anymore, do they?
Well, I don't think you meant
Jeffrey?
to.
Or
Yeah,
Philip?
I mean,
Or Troy?
it's great to fly the flag, but it's got dodgy, risky repercussions at the other end.
Yeah,
Right,
risky.
Troy?
Did you, Troy?
Yeah, I just think it was an ugly look for the game, and detracted from what was a great last 3 quarters by the Cats. They just steamed home, and Port Adelaide, they've got some massive worries the way they're playing.
Now, I don't agree with you, Troy.
I didn't think you would.
In terms of the fact it was an
Surprise,
ugly look,
surprise.
because I believe the coach did the right thing in standing up for Dangerfield in that situation, saying, well, we're not overly happy with the way that attack on the ball took place, and don't do it again. And give them a bit of a warning, and so they think about that in the backs of their minds.
What's
and
that got to do with Port Adelaide not playing good football?
Oh, he's
No, I'm just
he's
talking
15
about. You
seconds
said it was an
behind.
ugly. Are you saying that Scott talking to Hartley was an ugly look for the game, or the incident was an ugly look for the game, or the melee was an ugly look for the game?
All
All
three.
three.
All three.
All three.
Okay. Well, then I'm
Yeah.
responding and saying that Scott, in my opinion, if I was Chris Scott, I would have done what he did. I might have been a little
But
more
the Geelong
vociferous than
players,
Scott was.
the Geelong players responded to the Dangerfield and
No,
the,
they
the
did,
other
yeah.
incident
Yeah.
by lifting their tempo and wiping the other mob
did.
off the.
Well,
off
they
the
come
mat.
out a different team after
Yeah,
a
they were
quarter time.
fired up by it, and Adelaide probably, in retrospect, would probably regretted having
Regretted
done.
if you say fired them up.
Yeah,
Now, is Port
exactly. Yeah.
Adelaide, they're cooked for the year. You would tend to think at the moment, cooked.
Yeah, no,
But
I think
Troy,
so.
why are they cooked? Troy?
I don't know. I don't look. Phil,
took
I think I
everybody
just
by
mentioned that
surprise.
3 minutes
You
ago,
did.
but
I told you he was
Peaky
30
obviously
seconds
wasn't
behind.
agreeing with me.
No,
And
it was 30 seconds behind.
That was that part 3 of your 3-pronged point. that
you
presented.
need to keep drinking your coffee, mate.
The Port Adelaide.
Troy, why are the wheels falling off Port Adelaide?
It's an interesting one. Obviously, this week they've got Wingard and Robbie Gray out. So they've been decimated with injuries. They've got
Nice foot
Angus
scraper.
Monfries. They've got Ryder. They'd be in their best 22, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Schultz isn't playing.
Yeah.
He was a vital part of their forward
Yeah.
line. So there's pieces of the jigsaw at Port Adelaide, obviously, that are missing. Their success 2 years ago was built on all those players playing at their optimum, injury-free. But once a few have fallen away, they've been exposed.
Yeah, I think they underachieved under the previous bloke. And this guy came along and he was a bit of a genius and he had a fitness and another technique and they took people by surprise. They had their own method, didn't they?
They did.
And it was outstanding for a year or two, but then everyone's sort of done their homework on Port Adelaide. And as Troy said, they've had other problems like injuries and structural problems. So they've probably only had 15 or 16 of their best players on the field at any game this year.
And I tell you what, they leak out the back something chronic too.
They do. Their defence is an absolute worry.
So-
And thank you very much.
So does he.
They're poor defensively, Philip. They are poor defensively. I don't know what they're going to do about it, but the feeling I get, and I have been talking to people in the last 7 days, that possibly the players they're not listening to the coach, or the coach has lost the players. There seems to be a fragmentation between players, playing stock, and coach. Now, if that's happened, they've got a real tough year coming up if he can't get them back on the
What are
same
your
page.
thoughts, Pulse, on presidents coming out and making statements as bold as David Koch did in regards to Port Adelaide's
I
form?
can remember we beat Collingwood at North in '74, and Tommy Sheeran got up after the game and got stuck into Richardson and Thompson and McKenna and all these blokes. And I remember saying to Alan Ayler, I said, "You were a superstar. Do you reckon, President, would you ever tear the strips off? Because you're entitled to. You were
Yes,
champion,
yeah.
won the Tassie medal.
Ultimate,
Len
yeah.
Smith said he was the best player in the competition in 1958, and he said, "No, I wouldn't. I don't think it's the president's role." So, and I think, and Koch is no Alan Ayler, does he? He's a TV star, So I don't think he had any right
So
to.
it was totally unwarranted.
I don't think so. I reckon there's plenty of people there that's their role to chastise the players. The coach,
It's Twitter. Anything you're going to write an email or a tweet, get up, go for a walk for 15 minutes, then go back, read it again, and then send it.
That's
Never
great advice.
Reassess.
Phil.
Yeah.
anything straight off the bat, especially if you've had a shirt full at the football. Your team's got absolutely poleaxed. Don't pull out your phone and start sending off the
So
tweets.
what you're trying to
It's
say
not
to
good.
me
Yeah.
is get Peaky on Twitter, ASAP.
No. What he's trying to say, Troy, is David Koch needs Stephen J. Peake as his lawyer advisor. That's what he's trying to say.
Actually, no.
Gee.
That's how I translated
He'd be in a world of hurt if that happened.
You've got to have a good look at this bloke because Port Adelaide a few years ago were broke. They went to the AFL cap in hand and they were given him
Like,
a
I'm
big
not saying he
fat
hasn't done a
No,
bad job.
he's done
They
great.
got 2 or 3.
Behind the scenes,
They
he's
got, the
done some
AFL gave him
great-
2 or 3 million.
He's done great.
They gave 2 or 3 million, they
Great.
He has.
Basically operating as a professional beggar and going to the AFL and saying, we're broke and our administration's cooked and we can't get South Australian put out an us on side. Can you please send it in administrators and give us some money? The AFL, from what Mark Vine said last
Bailed
night,
them
wrote
out.
out a cheque for between $8 and $10 million.
It wasn't that
Sent in
much, but it was a
Matthews
fair
and the
way.
rest of the AFL team to redo their administration, put them all together, built them up again. No one else got this sort of treatment. They were cotton-wooled. And they were given massive handouts and massive administration help. And, okay, they made the finals, a couple of years ago, and they looked like they were going all right. But what's happened since then? St Kilda tried to recruit Alan Richardson as a coach. He went berserk and wanted compensation. He wanted financial compensation and I think a replacement coach. Then he goes to China with the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister says off the cuff, I think we should play an AFL game here. He goes, oh, yeah, Port Adelaide will be part of that. Yeah, let's do this, do that. And all of a sudden the headlines are AFL game in China. Where's the game? What field are they playing on? The Shanghai Oval?
You know how
who's the other team? How much is involved? Who's paying for the game?
And being a Tasmanian, Stephen, you know how upset I am about this China thing, the Shanghai Sharks, you know. I mean, we've now been relegated to about number 10, I think. On the
Dragons.
list.
Yes, now you've got
Yes,
the teams who are
I
getting in
think,
front of
I
Tasmania.
think, yes, I think there's the Shanghai Sharks, the Cape Town Cougars, the Wellington Walruses, the San Francisco 59ers, the Port Moresby Porpoises, the Darwin Dragons, the Townsville Termites, the Canberra Cruisers, the Manus Island Maulers. In other words, you could call them the Manasseh Maulers.
Really?
And and even the Nauru Nats, I thought, the GNATS, the Nauru Nats, or the Christmas Island Crays. So
Very clever, Pops.
This is ahead of.
That's very clever.
This is ahead of
So how many in total there?
That's 11 ahead of us.
So that's 11 possible destinations for St Kilda to relocate.
And this is the state that produced this side, the best ever team, born in Tasmania or... I like that line.
Just before you start with that, Geoffrey, is that Cougars team? Is that a men or women's team? Cougars.
yes,
Philip, you got any knowledge on that?
No, that's up your alley there, Steve.
I might call
5 Cougars, thanks.
them... I call them Pumas then, Stephen.
Okay, that's all right. Proceed,
It's a form
there,
of
Mr. Poulter. Thank you.
form of cougar is a puma. Born in Tasmania, or in the case of 2 of these, recruited from Tasmania as young players. Right, this is the best Tasmanian team of all
Just
time.
a bit louder, Pots.
Right,
for,
this
for
is
the
the
benefit
best.
of Stephen.
The best composite Tasmanian team of all time is Barry Lawrence, Tassie Johnson, and Alistair Lynch. The half-back line is, I'll do it in Don Hyde style.
Don Hyde.
Lynn Howell, Laurie Nash and Rodney Eade. The centre line is John Greening, Ian Stewart and Paul Williams. The half-forward line is Darryl Ballock, Royce Hart and Nick Rewalt. The forward line is Michael Roach, Peter Hudson and Mick Conlon. The ruck is Ivor Warren-Smith, Brent Croswell and Paul Sproul. And the interchange are Matthew Richardson, Percy Jones, John Bonney, Graham Wright, Jack Rewalt and Darren Pritchard.
What a great team. That is Phil Mance.
That's a great team. And I notice also,
St Kilda
Geoffrey,
people in there.
and I notice also, Geoffrey, you've done the right thing there. You put Verden Howell on a half-back flank, which he played a fair bit of his football there because his
Well, he played
football
the
was
grand
distributed.
final.
In charge of the scout.
He played a
Verden
grand
Howell.
final on a back flank. He played full forward in the 1965 grand final side, and he played full back prior to midway through 1965 for his first 5.5 years in the game.
That aren't
We
as
needed
old
to
as you and
play.
I, or older than you and I. I
Do you
reckon.
think we need to put a...
Like a year stop, a backstop.
Was that?
A backstop on what?
Well, because 1954, 1923.
No, that's the best Tasmanian team of all time.
I
he's
know
put
that,
there.
but-
Yeah, they can be a current day player. They're good enough to get in. They'll get in.
How on earth would you know about something in 1965? You were 5.
No, I was 10. I was
10.
10, and I
It's
can
like
tell you
someone
because I was
had-
living in the St Kilda football rooms at that time. I was at every match. So
If you
what,
did,
under
if you
the
spent
bench or
50
did you
years
go
in
home?
I was
or
watching
not?
the game in the coach's box in 62 through to 64 at Junction Oval, and 1 year at Moorabbin before I had to sit in the grandstand. So I had a very fortunate upbringing, ladies and gentlemen. It was very pleasant.
I've been in the media for 50 years, and I've been on Team of the Centuries committee.
Yeah.
And I'm a historian. I haven't got much going for me, but I think I'm a football
Oh, don't
historian.
talk yourself
talk
down.
yourself down.
It's
Jeffrey.
not a football book I haven't
No.
read.
No.
And I just remember, I've got a photographic memory. It's one of the few.
Oh, really?
So I remember a lot of facts and figures, you see.
You're one of the best in the business.
I've got a lot of
100%.
weaknesses.
You
but
are.
I've got
There's absolutely no reason for
footy
you to
facts.
criticise.
in
Oh, I'm not. I'm
It's
I
criticising you.
appreciate that.
I've read your articles for many years, and I've listened to you on SEN 1116,
I've just-
Melbourne's
Every
home of
week.
sport, many
I
times.
appreciate that.
And if there's
He's
a
a
guy
doyen.
that you need to go
He's a doyen.
to get it right, you're
the
the man.
Thanks.
Exactly.
No,
The guy,
I appreciate that. I
the
appreciate
guy to
that.
the left here, not so much.
I was
But
just
you,
responding to Philip.
That's
No,
That's
I
okay.
was talking about him.
Oh, him.
That's all right.
Because
Geoffrey
How would
Poulter
you know?
Geoffrey Poulter is an historian. I am a modern day guerrilla fighter. That's what I am. Huh?
you're a gorilla.
Geoffrey, have
He
you got any
leaks
more,
out the back.
if you've got any more issues, we'll go into the games to get your opinion on, and Troy's opinion and Philip's and mine on the games coming up. So
I just
If we're
want
only
to
going
yeah,
on
you've got
50
another
minutes,
quick
I
point to
can't
make,
believe
yes, Geoffrey? Geoffrey Poulter, ladies and gentlemen, former
I
editor,
just saw
Sunday Herald Sun.
during the week they were
and
talking about this
Friday Herald
China
Sun.
thing, you know, and they have released some figures that 146,000 people were playing Australian rules outside Australia.
Yeah.
And I
Is that right?
There's 193 countries at Rio. I thought, hang on. I thought I find it hard to believe that there's 1,000 Australians playing, an average of 1,000 Australians playing footy in every country in the world, including Gabon, Bolivia, and the Galapagos Islands.
And don't forget
the
Equatorial
Galapagos
Guinea.
Islands, yeah.
Yeah? What about Equatorial Guinea that Troy mentioned
So
before the show
I
started?
think
Yes.
it's marvellous if it is. If
It's
there
famous
are,
for, Stephen.
But can
Eric Mombassa, the
find it
famous
difficult.
swimmer.
Eric Mombassa.
take a lot of
Very
convincing.
close.
Exactly.
Very close. Now, you're a...
The games.
Yeah,
No,
sorry
just
about
just
Get on with
quickly. Pete was a
Eric
big
the
fan
Eel.
of Eric the Eel at the Olympics.
Yeah,
And
I
Pete-
went and watched the movie. Eric the Eel. Or
No,
Eric
Eddie the Eagle.
Eddie the Eagle.
No, Eric the
It's
Eel.
either Eric Mombassa or Eric Mossapatami.
Yeah.
One or the
What
other.
is his name, Troy?
Well, I'm just going with something in between. Eric Mossambani. I'm going with that. But I'd just like to say that
Good enough, it's
Peaky...
close enough there.
That was the highlight of the Olympics for Peaky because he said it was the only event in Olympic history where a lifeguard was required. Which I thought was very unfair on Eric.
I did
That
go
was-
and watch
well, hang on a
the...
minute, did he say I said that? I never said that.
Didn't you say that?
No,
What did
he
you say?
said that. He's trying to lump that on me. I mean, as if I was critical of that trying his guts out in the pool to get from one end to the other or whatever. If a lifeguard, that was rubbish. There was no lifeguards.
They threw a crocodile in with him to make
Oh,
him
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
swim a
go
bit
with
quicker
fast.
then.
I
Do you
went and
remember Ron
saw...
Barassi's theory? You know what Ron Barassi's theory was at training, at the end of training, and some players he said some players would start whinging, saying, "Oh, we're a bit tired, Ron," or "She was just at the end of it now," whatever. He said, "If I threw half a dozen lions from the zoo onto the ground now, you boys will find another yard of pace."
Well, that's right.
It's a bit like throwing an apple pie in front of
Right,
you
yeah.
and you'd find an extra few yards just quietly.
He said
Well, behind the car. It'd be flat out.
That is,
they weren't allowed
that's an unconscionable comment.
Grassy wouldn't let him have any water, and they said,
No water.
The sun. They said, don't worry about the sun. It's 186,000 miles away. It's not going to hurt you.
Did Barassi say that, Pulse? Did
He
he?
said that, yeah.
Oh, that's gold.
Actually, he lives around here. We should get him to come
He's a
over.
good man, Barassi. Recently had his 80th Pulse,
80th,
which you
yeah.
attended.
Yes.
Phenomenal,
Eight
gentlemen.
Yeah, he was a great
And
man.
that was it. He played in 5 or 6 premiership sides as a player. Coached 4.
Played in 6.
Six, played 6, coached 4, and
And
how
doesn't
many
give himself any credit for the half.
for the half.
So, he signs
Well, the
his
draw.
17 for 10. Yeah.
17 for 10,
It
was
should
it?
be 17 for 10 and a half.
10 and a half. Okay, gee whiz.
All right, right. First
Now, there you
game.
go. Well, North Melbourne are playing the Bulldogs at Etihad Stadium, which is, I'll start off by critical of the AFL straight away. That game 2 weeks ago should have been switched to the MCG, but no one listens to me because they
Okay.
would have got 80,000. So in for the Bulldogs, it comes F. Roberts. I think is it Franklin Roberts or is it
Fletcher,
Fletcher
Roberts.
Sorry, Fletcher
Sorry to interrupt.
Roberts. Sorry, named after the
What's
famous
his job?
mutineer from the Mutiny on the Bounty, Fletcher Christian, I'd say that his parents have named him Fletcher. Out goes Matthew Suckling with an ankle. Oh, excuse me. Got a bit of a cough there.
You right there? Do we
Kangaroos.
need to see your
No.
snot coming out of your nose?
No, change to the Kangaroos, Jeffrey. We'll start with you.
I'm biased, but I think if we can't. A lot of people are not convinced about the Kangaroos. If we can't win tonight, even if we're on a kicking to nothing, because if we win, people will say, "Oh, Footscray got four players out." So if we can't beat them with the 4 players out, well, we're not going to beat them next time.
So
Interesting. Troy?
Pick North. I think it'll be a great game.
Yeah.
We're going around in a...
Troy?
Yeah, look, I agree with that.
Going the Melbourne way.
Saying that the injuries are just cruelling the Bulldogs at the moment, but they keep finding a way. Etihad Stadium, the flat track, the fast track, they love it. I think they've only been beaten once, Pulse, in the last 11 or 12 games there. Yeah. So they've got a great track record. North are at the top of their game, but I think the leg speed of the Bulldogs, this game will be won in the midfield. And I'm tipping an absolute epic, 1 or 2 goals, the Bulldogs.
Philip?
I'm going to go the Bulldogs. I was very impressed with them last week. I think they played really well, and I was a bit hesitant, I think, last week picking them, if I picked against them, I think. But really, they're the real deal this year. You've got to say they're playing well. They've got depth because they've got several players out injured, but they keep coming and they keep running and they keep winning.
Well, I tipped North Melbourne to win the premiership back in March before a ball was bounced and got them on top of my ladder. So they've got enough experience, skill, toughness about them. I like the toughness. They've got some real tough players in there that are great for finals matches. I think they'll beat the Bulldogs. They won't beat them for pace, but what they'll do, they'll bottle this game up. Etihad will suit the North style because they'll try and bottle up the pace of the Bullies and try and pocket them into the back and forward structures and try and stop liquid ball movement. That's what they'll be trying to do. North Melbourne by 2 goals.
Right.
The next game that we go to, gentlemen, as I flip through to the games, Melbourne are playing St Kilda on the Etihad Stadium surface tomorrow and at 1:45 p.m. In for Melbourne, Petrarca for his first game, the young kid who was a number 2 pick in the 2014 draft. Out goes Brayshaw, dropped for the second time this year. Angus Brayshaw, that's a worrying sign. In for St Kilda, Membry, Akers and Gresham. Out goes McCartan, who's being managed, the big fellow. Lee has been dropped after just, I think, the 1 game in defence or 2 games in defence, and Jason Loney, one of the small players. They had to get rid of 1 or 2 of them because they were found wanting last week in the flogging that was received by GWS.
Who was that, Stephen?
What was that, sorry?
Who's out?
Loney for St Kilda, along with Lee. And
Is it Jason or Jack?
I
think it's Jack Loney.
Jack Loney? Yep. Jack Loney, yep. He's a Loney, that's the main thing. And he's out. Geoffrey.
I'm going for Melbourne, but I think Melbourne would prefer the game to be played at the MCG. We're talking about Etihad. So I think that'll suit St Kilda. But Melbourne's form's slightly better, isn't it? And I noticed in Hobart, I thought in Hobart they were really impressive. And they've gone from this line where you've got about 5 or 6 good players to about 12 good players. Now they've got about 18. They've actually... I like Dyson and I like that number 3 on the halfback flank.
Troy?
Yeah, congratulations too to Christian Petrarca. It'll be an exciting day for him to make his league debut after his first year was unfortunately put on hold due to a serious injury. Yeah, look, Melbourne could be the real deal, Pulse. Very disappointing against Essendon not too long ago, but that game against North Melbourne, I think that might be season-defining for them to know that they've got the confidence to go with the big boys. And Jack Viney, love the way he plays. Max Gawn in career best form. The Saints, had a little bit of a downer last week, so I'm tipping Melbourne by 5 to 6 goals.
I'm thinking Melbourne. I think St Kilda have, just lost their way a bit last week, but previously been playing really well. I'm thinking Melbourne 3 goals.
Good point, Phil. As I sipped my liquid black coffee there, beautiful brew. I was very disappointed with St Kilda's form last week. Look, I know they came back from a tough game in Tasmania against Hawthorn, and it's a young list, but to leave all of the work up to a 33-year-old warrior who had to run up and down the ground, defend forward, kick 4 goals, and get banged up, get a knee in the back from Davis, who I did scream at during the match or whatever, who was uncomplimentary towards Revolt in that match on one occasion, was very disappointing. So there's a few in that side, and that includes young Minchington and even young and the other boy in the pocket, Sinclair. They're lucky they didn't get dropped along with Loney because they weren't good last week. So, unlike the coach, I can name players. Melbourne probably win this, I think probably by 2 to 3 goals. I hope that's what it would be, but I hope St Kilda wins, of course, but I think Melbourne at the moment are on fire.
It's interesting you say that, Stephen. St Kilda have got a very good record against Melbourne.
They have got a great record, 5 in a row, I think, or 6 in a row. It's been in fact, they've had the wood on Melbourne since 06, the 06 elimination final. I think Melbourne only won about 2 out of 16 games or something.
And
Melbourne don't like Etihad.
They don't, Pulse. Notoriously, they've had a
Bad run
abysmal record at Etihad Stadium. So
And the other thing is Jack Watts has normally played well against St Kilda too in the matches he's played the last 3 or 4 years. So,
Okay.
look, I still think Melbourne are going to be a bit too strong. I mean, you look at history books and all the rest of it, but at the end of the day, it's what's put together on the day. I'd be surprised if we got up, but I wouldn't be totally blown out of the sky because St Kilda pushed Hawthorn to 2 weeks ago. Young sides have become yo-yo teams,
Righto.
a bit
Next.
up and down. Next game, Adelaide v Fremantle. That game is at the Adelaide Oval tomorrow at 2:10 p.m. At the Adelaide Oval, of course, they got rid of that other stadium. I think by now should have blocks of flats on it, you'd hope. I don't know if they haven't. Adelaide, no change. Milestone, D. Mackay, 150 games. Good solid player for Adelaide. In for Fremantle, their captain, David Mundy, comes in, and Connor Blakely wasn't picked last week but played, and he's playing his second game. And Ross Lyon's starting to blood some young players. Out goes Johnson with a string and Nat Fife with a busted leg. So a lot of things not going Fremantle's way, as we explained earlier on in the show there, Geoffrey.
Monday back for Saturday and May out for May. I think Adelaide will win easily. Fremantle, especially over there, Fremantle are really struggling. I reckon if Fremantle get within 6 goals, they've done well.
Troy.
cut and dry. Adelaide at the top of their game at the moment. That forward line, Lynch, Walker,
Yeah,
Betts,
listen to this.
Lynch,
Yeah, I'm just saying, I'm waiting for the punchline.
Cameron. Throw Cameron down there, the goal sneak. Gee whiz, it's
Here
going to
it
be
comes.
a tough game, this one.
Here it comes.
But I'm tipping an upset, boys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Adelaide by 12.
12. I
12
think
goals.
Adelaide
12 goals, that is.
Adelaide, 10
Yeah.
goals.
10 goals? Yeah, look, I think if Adelaide don't win this game by 10 goals after what they did last week, I'd be shocked.
Look,
But they could
Fife
have a
and
letdown.
Johnson out too. Huge
Right,
out.
Huge loss. But the other thing is this, is that teams after they play Hawthorn, not too sure how the other sides have gone this year, but there could be a bit of a letdown. Anyway, to me, Adelaide by 5 goals.
Next.
GWS Giants play Hawthorn at Spotless Stadium tomorrow. In for Hawthorn, Howe and Lavelle.
It's the cleanest stadium in the AFL.
It is. Out goes Langford with a cork quad and heart tongue. The new man is Lavelle. He comes from Kingsborough, Tasmania there, Geoffrey.
Yeah, my hometown.
19-year-old from your hometown,
Kingston
Kingborough.
Beach.
Kingborough.
Oh, really?
Well, the area team is called Kingborough, but the
gee.
Kingston Beach. Yeah.
Okay,
Is
Kingston
Kieran
Beach.
Lovell, is he playing?
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Lovell.
Yeah, that's what he said. Lovell, yeah, Lavelle.
It's the same
Kieran Lavelle.
hometown.
In for GWS is Reece Palmer, Troy. Out goes D. Smith with a knee. He's had a fair bit of knee trauma lately, that boy. And they're sending him away, I think, for an exotic operation. I'm not too sure exactly where. But
One of the games of the round, this.
this is a game of the round, Geoffrey.
Yes, and Lovell boy, we mentioned Stephen, the same hometown as Trent Nichols, Andrew Lamprell. It's SEN's Tim Hazel, remember him?
Jimmy Hazel.
I do, Tim Hazel. Played for
And
Hawthorn.
Shane Stevenson that played with Hawthorn.
Oh. Yes.
Come from Kingston Beach.
Shane Stevenson, they
Yeah.
over from the 60s and 70s.
I think this will be an upset. I think GWS, well, of sorts. I think GWS will win. I reckon they are good things.
Righto.
I reckon Hawthorn are on the wobbly and they're ready to, and very, very impressive GWS.
You know what, Pulse? It can't happen again, can it? The Hawks by 3 points. It just can't happen.
Steph
It'll
Curry.
be a great game. With Hawks by goal.
One thing about GWS, they play a very confident brand of football, so confident they actually get arrogant about it and they're very overconfident. If they go with that attitude against Hawthorn, they'll get beaten because Hawthorn can knock the stuffing out of teams that think very highly of themselves, and GWS have got that type of issue about them at the moment. They're arrogant, and the Hawthorn's a sort of side that could cut them down to size.
The ground.
Then again,
the ground.
yeah, they've got to play up there.
Yeah.
Hawthorn have been very fortunate of late. They make their own luck though, Hawthorn. They never give up.
Right.
I think
go for
Hawthorn knocked them over last year, Pulse, didn't they?
up there, I think so,
yeah.
Yeah, they're better now, though, aren't they?
Look, I'm swayed. I don't know. I'm going to stick with Hawthorn, and I reckon by 2 goals because I believe that they'll have the experience that will put GWS Giants away in the last quarter, but GWS could be leading up to 3/4 time. Richmond are playing Port Adelaide on none other than the MCG tomorrow.
Well, I hate to be a pain, but you only got 2 minutes left.
got 2 minutes left.
Otherwise, you're going to have voice but no video. So just do the wins and who's going to win.
Okay, Richmond, Port Adelaide, to them, Geoffrey.
I'm going for Richmond.
Tigers.
Tigers.
Tigers, Richmond. Geelong, Gold Coast, Geoffrey.
Geelong easily.
Geelong by 6.
Geelong by
Phil?
5.
Geelong by 5 goals. Brisbane Lions v Sydney at Brisbane.
Sydney easily.
Sydney in a hand canter.
Sydney, 10 goals.
Sydney, 8 goals. Carlton v Essendon on Sunday.
Carlton by 3 or 4 goals.
Yep. Troy.
Carlton by a point.
Oh,
Carlton by 6 goals.
Essendon by 2 goals. West Coast v Collingwood at Subiaco. Geoffrey?
West Coast easily.
Collingwood reality check. West Coast by 6 goals.
West Coast 5 goals.
West Coast 3 goals, and that brings us to the end of another edition of the Gladiators of Sport. Alan Mance Moulders, Footscray Melton and Bacchus Mass Mance Main, who's got a hold of me here, baby. And of course, liquid black coffee right here in Middle Park, which is the best coffee you can get. And along with Yellow Door, Breakfast Eatery, and along with Ricardo's Trattoria in Albert Park, and also Dunderson Fawcett from Albert Park as well for Troy, and also the Emerald Hotel in South Melbourne for Mr. Geoffrey Poulter, wonderful sponsor. We'll be back next week with more of the Gladiators of Sport, episode 5 next week. Be there!
That's very good.